We shall commence this module by discussing the concept of inequality. Inequality can be defined as different people having different degrees of something, often considered in terms of income or consumption, but can be equally applied to other dimensions of living standards, showing a perpetual pattern of variation such as the education level or the malnutrition degree. Three concepts of world inequality which need to be sharply differentiated as it often leads to ambiguity. The first concept is unweighted international inequality. This concept takes country as the unit of observation, uses its income or GDP per capita, disregard its population and thus compares all the countries in the world as to be of equal size. The second type of inequality is population weighted international inequality, where it is still assumed that everyone in a country receives the same income, but the number of representative individuals in each of the country represents the size of the population. The third concept calculates inequality across all individuals in the world. The author contends that it is the true world income distribution as it treats, in principle, everybody the same. The other definition of welfare, which is many a times considered in analysis, is that of relative poverty, defined as having less in a specific dimension relative to other society members. This concept is based on the idea that the way individuals or households perceive their position in society is an important facet of their welfare. In last sections, relative poverty line has been used which catch dimension of welfare to a definite extent by categorizing as poor those who have less than some societal norm. The overall level of inequality in a country, region or population group, and more generally the distribution of consumption, income or other attributes is also in itself a prominent welfare dimension in that group. Inequality measures can be calculated for any distribution, not just for consumption, income or other monetary variables, but also for land and other continuous and cardinal variables. After studying this module, you shall be able to know about the basic concept of inequality, the kinds of inequalities that exist other than just income inequality, the current scenario of inequality in India. Let us now understand the measures of inequality. Lorenz curve of income distribution, Gini coefficient of inequality. This is the most commonly used measure of inequality. The coefficient lies between 0 and 1, representing complete equality and complete inequality respectively. One person has all the income or consumption, all others have none. Graphically, the area between the Lorenz curve and the line of best fit can simply reflect the Gini coefficient. The Lorenz curve shows the cumulative income share on the vertical axis and the population distribution on the horizontal axis. In this example, 40% of the population obtains around 20% of the total income. The income distribution curve will be straight line in the graph if every person had the same income or there is total equality, that is the line of total equality. To calculate Gini's coefficient, the area A is to be divided by the sum of the area A and B. The Lorenz curve and the line of total equality would merge and the Gini coefficient would be 0 if there is equal distribution of income totally. If an individual has all the income, the Lorenz curve would pass through the point 0, 0, 100, 0 and 100, 100. And the surfaces A and B would be similar, leading to a value of 1 for Gini's coefficient. It is sometimes argued that one of the disadvantages of Gini's coefficient is that it is not additive across groups, that is, the total Gini of a society is not equal to the sum of the Ginis for its subgroups. The Gini coefficient of India is 33.9. Thiel index. While less common than the Gini's coefficient, the Thiel index of inequality has a positive point of being additive across different subgroups or regions in the country. The Thiel index, however, does not have a straight ahead depiction and falls short of pleading interpretation of the Gini's coefficient. The Thiel index is a member of larger family of measures which are known as the general entropy class. Decile dispersion ratio. Decile dispersion ratio is used many times, which presents the ratio of the average consumption or income of the richest 10% of the population divided by the average income of the bottom 100. I repeat, divided by the average income of the bottom 10%. This ratio can also be calculated for other percentiles, for instance, dividing the average consumption of the richest 5%, the 95th percentile, by that of the poorest 5%, that is the 5th percentile. This ratio can be interpreted readily by depicting the income of the rich as multiples of that of the poor. Share of income or consumption of the poorest X%. A disadvantage of both the Gini's coefficient and the Thiel indices is that they vary when the distribution varies, no matter if the change occurs at the top or at the bottom or in the middle. That is, any transfer of income between two individuals has an impact on the indices irrespective of whether it takes place among the rich, among the poor, or between the rich and the poor. If society's concern is about the share of income of the people at the bottom, a better indicator may be a direct measure such as the share of income that reaches poorest 10 or 20%. Such a measure would not vary, for example, with the changes in tax rates, resulting in less disposable income for the top 20% at the advantage of the middle class in lieu of poor. It is probable that distinct measures will rank the identical set of distributions in distinct ways due to their distinct sensitivity to incomes in different parts of the distribution. When ranking are dubious, another method of stochastic dominance can be applied. The attached paper inequality. Methods and tools discuss a type of stochastic dominance which can be used for unambiguous comparisons of inequality across distributions, the mean normalized second order dominance or Lorentz dominance. Now, we shall move on to discuss the inequality in India. The same regulatory reforms that led economy of India to grow so promptly over the past 20 years have also had a severe impact on the poorest citizens of nation. According to 2011 Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, that is OECD report, income inequality has doubled in India from the early 1990s. The richest 10% of Indians earn approximately 12 times as much money as the poorest 10% compared to roughly 6 times in 1990. One of the rapid growing emerging economies of any newly industrialized nation in the world is Indian economy. However, other countries have made noticeable more progress in meeting the problem of income inequality. Brazil, Indonesia and some other indicators, Argentina have recorded significant progress in reducing the inequality over the past 20 years according to the OECD report. By contrast, China, India, the Russian Federation and South Africa have all become less equal over time. Since 1951, the organization which has worked to fight child poverty in the country is Child Fund. Despite the introduction of many initiatives to address the social cause of poverty, there is much work to be done. The OECD report reported that programs for poverty reduction have been less compelling than what was thought previously, and also implied that 42% of the Indian population stays beneath the poverty line. The causes of income inequality are highly complex and dependent on a range of factors, and the effects are damaging to the vulnerable populations, especially the young. Children born to parents in low income areas are at higher risk of the child mortality and disease. According to the UNICEF data, 28% of children born in India between 2006 and 2010 were underweight at birth, and close to 48% of children under the age of 5 were affected by moderate to severe growth stunting as a result of malnutrition. Through government initiatives and work of Child Fund and other non-governmental organizations, conditions are gradually improving. UNICEF data also implies that 88% of Indians living in a rural area had approached to improve drinking water in 2008, and more than 20% of the rural Indians had approached to better sanitation facilities during the identical time period. Despite these gains being encouraging, some additional efforts can be put to improve the lives of children living in India's poorest communities. The finest way to aid Child Fund fighting against child poverty is by donating to our Dream Bike campaign. Furnishing children of rural areas with the support to get into school and attain an education, this program strives to provide 800 schoolgirls in India and Sri Lanka with bicycles. Till date, we have supplied over and above 600 bicycles. Another way you can get involved is by purchasing a gift from our Real Gifts catalog. With multiple ways to provide, along with helping us provide water filters for an Indian school and medical checkups for disabled children, our catalog enables you to help us fight child poverty and offer children a brighter future. Though the ranking of India is as low as 4th in South Asia, taking into account both adult literacy rate and youth or child literacy, the field of education has got many achievements since independence, as the data of government shows. The average literacy rate was 65% in 2001, up from 18% in 1951. The figure of uneducated persons fell for the first time since census 1951 by almost 32 millions in absolute terms between 1991 and 2001. The fact is that every third illiterate person in the world belongs to India, and that is where our improvements fade away. Of close to 200 million children in 6 to 14 age group, only 120 million are enrolled in school. Inadequate budget allocation, dismal school infrastructure in rural areas, high dropout rates, caste bias, gender bias, etc. are the hallmarks of our education system, this report states. There have been consistently regressive budgetary allocation for education. Unplanned allocation in education fell in real per capita from a meager Rs 15.40 to Rs 14.68 between 2002 and 2003. The planned allocation on education declined from Rs 0.30 per capita in 2002 and 3 to Rs 0.18 in 2003 and 4. Significant schemes in education sector like the National Program for Women's Education have been discarded. Promises are being made by subsequent governments to kick education expenditure up to 6% of GDP. Central and state government spending on education has gone down from 4% in 1991-92 to 3.2% in 96 and 97. Below half of the total sum is spent on primary education. India has high dropout rate. From above 50% from class 1 to 8, the high rates are not due to the lack of demand for schooling from the relatively poorer household as is sometimes assumed. The problems mainly crop up from supply side. In fact, the required infrastructure such as proper rooms, desks, drinking water facilities, toilets is not available in most of the schools. According to the 5th All India Education Survey by NCERT 1990, first, barely half of the primary schools have a stone building. Second, 42% have a single classroom, if any. Third, just above half have a blackboard that can be used. Fourth, below half have drinking water facilities. Fifth, urinals are only 16%. Sixth, more than 60% have only one or two teachers, if any, for classes 1 to 5, and only 15% have more teachers. Although this is the all India average figure, the corresponding figures for the rural areas are even worse. A public report on basic education known as PROBE, developed by the researchers team based at the Center for Development Economics, Delhi and other institutions, conducted a thorough survey of the school system in North India in 1996. In 188 randomly selected villages of Bihar and Madhya Pradesh, the report inspected the school facilities and interviewed 1,221 households. It found that parents spend about Rs 366 per year to send a child to a government school. For an average agricultural labourer, getting 2 children admitted to primary school would mean 30 days' wages. Similarly, the teacher-pupil ratio has been declining from 26 primary school teachers for every 1000 pupil in 1981 to 21 teachers per 1000 pupils in 1996 according to the PROBE report. According to Kiran Bhatti of the PROBE team, these studies bear testimony to the apathy of the policy makers as rhetoric and reality so obviously continue to follow divergent paths. A misunderstanding of the real problems and a complete lack of commitment in tackling them are obvious from the fact that policy after policy and scheme after scheme have not succeeded to make any impressive effect. What it indicates is a near total absence of responsibility in the system, in effect almost a refusal to take responsibility for ensuring the provision of this basic service or rather of guaranteeing a fundamental right. Next, we shall discuss about the inequalities in landholding and property. As we have seen among landless agricultural labourers and their dependents, the problem which is pervasive is poverty. At independence, India had a large population of landless poor in rural areas and set about an ambitious program of land reform. There was introduction of national and state laws to restrict the family holding size and for the protection the tenant farmer's right. Rapid progress at the initial stage was followed by a period of slow progress. Corruption at a local level ensured that much land was not in fact transferred. For ones who owned land, the benefits were not long-lived. Loans for improvements of capital and inputs are often secured by land which was forfeit if repayments were not made. The fruits were reaped by the farmers with small to medium holdings who benefit at the cost of the large number of land owners and little benefit has reached to the poorest. The Green Revolution represents the other clear example of ever-growing inequality. This was a transformation in agricultural practices that occurred in 1967 to 78, associated with the expansion of the area under agriculture, double cropping, and the introduction of high-yielding variety of staple foodstuffs such as rice, wheat, and maize. India welcomed the Green Revolution warmly as a measure which will assure food security post-independence. A severe famine had occurred in Bengal under British rule in 1943 when 4 million people died of hunger. Materialistically, the Green Revolution had a great success. Yields remarkably increased, although these fruits of benefits were reaped by the larger landowners. High-yielding varieties need large amount of inputs of fertilizers and pesticides which the poor are not able to buy. The high rate of interest that rural money lenders demand in India led to the aggravation of the problem. Pesticides have also created environmental problems. Additionally, the greater mechanization of agriculture actually reduced the number of laboring jobs in some areas, making the landless even less secure. Thus, while the Green Revolution has resulted in benefit for some, it has also tended to increase inequalities in many areas. Plenty of food is available in India. In most parts of the country, the markets are well stocked with produce. Malnutrition is caused by a lack of ability to grow or purchase food. Let us now discuss about gender inequality. Girls and women is widely discriminated in India, in both the communities, be it Hindu or Muslim. The dowry system, that is the payment of money or goods by the family of a bride, reflects that girls are characterized by financial burden, and on the other hand, boys are considered as a source of income and prosperity. Nationwide, girls are fed less and taken to doctors less frequently, so mortality is greater. Death in childbirth is also unacceptably high, that is maternal death rate are over 0.5% of births. Women have low access to education and therefore they have lower literacy rates. Nationally, literacy rates are 64% for males but only 39% for females. In the poorer states, female literacy may be less than 25%. As a result, the level of opportunity for women is low. Lack of female education and power has been linked to high birth rates and population increase in the developing world. Recent government and international financed aid programs which strives to improve education and economic opportunities focusing women, hoping that more equitable development will result in an alleviation of poverty and a slowing of population increase. Now, we will summarize what we have discussed in this module. After 50 years of independence, India has made great progress. Remarkable industrial and economic development has been made and the country is reaching self-sufficiency swiftly. India has a promptly growing middle class with unparalleled access to goods and opportunities. Nevertheless, inequality is still very much a fact of life in India, largely a result of deep-rooted social and economic structures that perpetuate the privilege and limit the opportunities for the poor. The degree to which poverty and inequality have been addressed varies between regions. In the southern state of Kerala, which has a communist administration, is one of the most egalitarian with high rates of literacy among both men and women. In contrast, the northeastern state of Orissa lags far behind, partly a legacy of the Bengali zamindari system perpetuated by the British. Nationwide, despite the radical programs of land reforms and preferential treatment of the scheduled caste, those in power have proved unwilling to transfer wealth or opportunity at their own cost. Future should target upon reforms of money lending, especially in rural areas, to break the cycle of poverty and debt, continuing breakdown of the worst excesses of the caste system, continuing to ensure security of tenure, and improving the education and opportunities for women. World's largest democracy, that is India, with a population of over and above 1.2 billion people, in spite of making noticeable financial gains since the initiation of market-based economic reforms in the early 1990s, India continues to strive with multiple major problems including poverty, poor infrastructure and economic inequality. Though much progress has been made to meet the social causes of poverty in India, millions of children face a questionable future.